Hello everybody and welcome to Daf Yomi. To the millions tuning in, we are going to be doing Eruvin Daf Yud Gimel, page 14. We're going to be picking it up first of all though, from the Mishnah at the bottom of 13b, just so that we can all have a feel for where we are up to in the Gemara when we tackle today's Daf. So here we go, taking it from the Mishnah. You should be able to see it on the screen over here. And without further ado, let's get this show on the road. So the Mishnah says, Hakora Sha'amru, right? We've been talking in the first Mishnah about how when we're trying to get an alleyway ready for fit for use to be able to carry in the alleyway and to be able to move around a bit more freely. And if we remember, an alleyway is coming off of a public domain and is either going to hit a dead end or it's going to go straight through to another kind of space. So if we can imagine that one long alleyway, and off that alleyway will be multiple courtyards, chatzeirot, right? So in order to get that alleyway fit to be able to carry, so we need to make a correction. We need to put something in place which is subject to a dispute. We saw it in the first Mishnah. Do we have to have a crossbeam over the alleyway, or do we have to have a side post, which is essentially like a 2x4, attached to the wall, or do we need to have two side posts? We call that a lechi. So we talked about a korah and the crossbeam, and now in this Mishnah we're going to be asking what that beam is supposed to look like. So hakora sha'am, the crossbeam that we were talking about, rachba kadei lekabel ariach, it should be wide enough to be able to hold a small brick. V'ha'ariach chatzi levena shel shlosha tefachim, and this small brick is half the size of a large brick, which measures 3 tefachim. Daya l'korah shetehei rachba tefach kadei lekabel ariach l'rachbo. In truth, it is enough that the crossbeam should be a tefach in width, in order that it can support the weight of the small brick across its width. So that is the first din, the first point that is made in the Mishnah. Rachba kadei lekabel ariach, ubriya kadei lekabel ariach. It has to be wide enough to be able to support the weight of this small brick, and it also has to be sturdy enough to support the weight of the small brick. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rachba afal pi she'ein briya. It's as long as it is wide enough, it doesn't matter if it's not actually physically sturdy enough and robust enough, it will still qualify as a crossbeam according to Rabbi Yehuda. Haisa shel kash v'shel kanim, if it was made out of straw or if it was made out of reeds, so then we would look at it as if it had been made out of metal, meaning that even though it's very clearly insufficient to support the weight of a brick, according to Rabbi Yehuda, we are going to make it as if it is akuma. What if it is a curved crossbeam? So it's not even sitting flat to be able to support. It might be very sturdy, but it's not the right shape. Then we're going to consider it as if it was straight and flat. Agula, what if it was round? What if it was like a pole that was used as a crossbeam? Says Rabbi Yehuda, and we're going to view it as if it was square. And there's a very interesting end point to this Mishnah. The Mishnah tells us, Kol sheyesh be'kefa shloshat tefachim yesh bo rochav tefach, that any beam, any cylinder which has a circumference, or any circle, one should say as well, anything that has a circumference of 3 tefachim is going to have a width, i.e. a diameter of 1 tefach. If that sounds familiar, that's because it is the same mathematical formula as pi. So there you go. The Mishnah covers everything. We're at the top now of 14a and we're in the Gemara, to which the Gemara is going to talk about the minimum width of this korah, of this crossbeam. And the Gemara asks, tefach? You say it has to be a tefach? Tefach umechza boy. Surely it has to be a tefach and a half wide, because that is the size of the brick. Says the Gemara, Kevan derachav lekabel tefach idach chetzi tefach malbin le batina. Mashu mehagisa, mashu mehagisa v'kaima. Well, the thing is that the crossbeam is going to be wide enough to support something the size of a tefach, and then it's going to have on either side a bit of plaster, half a hand's breadth. And remember, that's a tefach, a fistful essentially. So we're talking about a little bit of plaster on one side, a little bit of plaster on the other side, and before you know it, you've got the required amount to be able to support the size of this brick. Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna says, Korah she'amru tzricha shetahei bariya kadei lekabel ariach. Rabba bar Rav Huna says that this beam that we were talking about has to be sturdy enough to be able to hold the small brick. Uma mido Korah einan tzrichin sheyehi bariyin kadei lekabel Korah ariach. But the supports that are holding the cross beam in place do not have to be sturdy enough to hold the beam and the small brick in place. Rav Chisda Omar, Rav Chisda says, Echad zeh ve'echad zeh tzrichin sheyiyu b'riyin kadei lekabel korah v'ariach. Rav Chisda says that actually both the cross beam and the supports, the brackets that hold it in place against the wall, they have to be sturdy enough to be able to hold a small brick as well as the cross beam. Continuing in the Gemara, Amar Rav Sheshes says, Hiniach korah al gabe mavui uparas alea machatzeles v'igbiya min akarka shlosha korah ein kan mechitza ein kan. He paints the following scenario. If you've got this crossbeam over the entrance to the alleyway, but you have draped a mat over this crossbeam for whatever reason, and this mat is now draping down and coming to 3 tefachim from the ground, then according to Rav Sheshes, you're not going to have achieved your valid crossbeam for the sake of being able to carry. You're also not going to have created a mechitza. Right? The whole point of these rectifications, the crossbeam and the side posts, they're supposed to be there to be able to view the alleyway as an enclosed space on 4 sides. So you might think that if I've got a mat or tarpaulin or a sheet or whatever it is that's dangling down, draping down over this beam, maybe that's going to be now considered as a fourth wall. According to Rav Sheshes, you're going to lose out on both the effectiveness of the crossbeam as well as you're not actually having created a partition at all. Korah ein kan daha mechasia. You have not got your crossbeam because it is covered up, it is obscured, right? And we have said previously that it's supposed to be visible and distinctive enough to be noticed. So it's not going to be noticed because you can't see it. And it's not going to be an effective partition because it's not sturdy enough and it's not robust enough, which means that anything that goes through it, like a goat, as it says in the Gemara over here, it's going to be able to push right past it, and so it's not going to be an effective partition. Continues the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, it's taught in the Baraisa, Korah hayotza mikotel zeh ve'eino noigas b'kotel zeh. Let's try and get a bit of a picture going for you on this one. All right, what if you have got the following scenario? We are going to hold it up to the camera and hopefully we'll all be able to see it. All right, over here in this example, what we can see is we have a crossbeam coming across, but it doesn't quite touch the other side of the wall, and there's a pole coming down, not in the middle, but somewhere in that space of the gap of the entrance to the alleyway. So what if you have a situation where your crossbeam is cutting across, but it's not actually touching the other side? Or alternatively, the next scenario that the Gemara is presenting is as follows. V'chein shtei koros achas yotze mikotel zeh v'achas yotze mikotel zeh ve'einan nogos zu b'zu. What if you have got a crossbeam two beams which are touching the alleyway on either side, but they're not quite meeting in the middle. So there's a gap there, pachos mishlosha, and the gap is less than 3 tefachim. Says the Gemara, ein sarech lahavi korah acheres. You do not need to bring another korah, another bit of crossbeam to be able to plug the gap. Shlosha, but if it was more than if it was 3 or more, sarech lahavi korah acheres, then you would need to bring something to complete that crossbeam for you. And the reason there is because we have a halachic principle called lavud, which is where we will view those less than 3 tefachim as being halachically closed. So even though we may have a reality, a physical reality where there's a gap, the halachic reality is going to plug that gap. And according to the principle of lavud, it's actually going to be closed off anyway. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, Pachos midalid ein sarich lahavi kara acher. If it's less than 4 tefachim, then you don't need to bring another crossbeam to plug the gap. Excuse me. Arba, but if it's 4 or more, then sarich lahavi kara acher, then you will need to bring another one. Continues the Gemara. V'chein shtayim karos hamas'imos lo bazu kadei lekabel ariach v'lo bazu kadei lekabel ariach. What if I've got 2 crossbeams which are touching from one end to the other? Individually, they're not wide enough to support the size and the weight of this brick, but there are 2 of them, and they are running parallel with each other. Says the Gemara, if going across both of them, it's able to support this brick, then you don't need to bring in any other kind of crossbeam as well. But if it's not able to, then you will need to bring in another crossbeam. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, if the 2 crossbeams can support the brick along its length, which is 3 handbreadths, then we don't need to bring another crossbeam as well. The in love, sarich lavi karacheres. But if it can't, then you do need to bring this secondary crossbeam, or actually 3rd crossbeam really, to be able to support this brick. Continues the Gemara. Hayu achas lemalav achas lemata. What if I've got 2 narrow crossbeams, which are individually they're not able to support this brick, and they're actually placed one on top of the other? So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yossi the son of Rabbi Yehuda says, Ro'in esa elyona ke'ilu hi lamata ve'esa tachtona ke'ilu hi lamala uvilvad shelo tehei elyona lamala mikaf ama v'tachtona lamata me'asara. So the opinion says as follows. Rabbi Yossi son of Rabbi Yehuda says that you consider the higher one as if it was lower and the lower one as if it was above, as in meaning we view them as if they are close together. And if we are able to do that, and together the size is enough to support this brick, then it's going to be valid. But that's as long as the upper beam is not higher than 20 amos, which we have said is a problem because it can't be too high, otherwise no one's going to notice it. And the lower one is not allowed to go below 10 handbreadths, because otherwise you are within the airspace of the ground. So as long as it's not in that threshold, then it's going to count, and you'll be able to view that as a valid crossbeam. Omar Abaye says, Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda, Savar Laka Avua. He holds like his father, Bechada. He holds like his father with regards to one matter, Upalig Aleh Bechada, and he disagrees with his father with regards to another matter. Savar Laka Avua Bechada. He agrees and supports the view and holds the view like his father in one matter, de is late ro'in, because he is of the opinion that ro'in applies. So Rabbi Yehuda had previously said that we view it as if it was sturdy, right? So ro'in is alluding to this concept of, even though the physical reality might not be that it's sturdy enough, the halachic reality is that we consider it to be sturdy enough. So he clearly holds like his father and agrees with this concept of ro'in, that we can apply a halachic reality even though it doesn't match the physical reality. But he must disagree with his father, because Rabbi Yehuda had held that you can have a valid alleyway even if the crossbeam is higher than 20 amos. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Savar, betoch esrim in lemala min esrim lo. And Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda had said that it has to be lower than 20 amot, otherwise it's not going to count. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rachba afal pi she'ein bria. So we have this quote from the Mishnah that we saw just before. Rabbi Yehuda saying that the width has to be wide enough, but it doesn't actually have to be sturdy. Again, because we view it and consider it as if it was sturdy. Masni le Rabbi Yehuda lechia barav kame derav. So Rabbi Yehuda taught this to Chia Barav in the presence of Rav. Rachba afal pi she'ein bria. He taught this concept that it has to be wide enough even if it's not actually sturdy enough. Amalei, Rav said to him, Asnaye Rachba bria. We should be teaching that it has to be wide enough and that it has to be sturdy enough. V'ha'amar Rabbi Elai Amarav. But hang on a minute. We have a challenge from the Gemara. Didn't Rabbi Elai say in the name of Rav, Rachba arba afal pi she'ein bria, that it has to be 4 tefachim wide to be able to be valid, but it doesn't have to be sturdy enough? Answers the Gemara, Rachba arba shani. It's different if it's 4 tefachim wide. We had been talking about that it has to be 3 tefachim wide. And if it's 3 tefachim wide, then Rav would say that it has to be sturdy as well. But if it's 4 tefachim wide, then it has a different consideration. And seeing what it's saying over here on the screen, he would say that the beam of that width is considered a roof and not a beam. And if it's considered a roof, then it's going to be more of a distinction. It's going to be valid as this partition that we need for the edge of the alleyway. And so 4 tefachim is going to be sufficient for Rav. Continues the Gemara, quoting the Mishnah, what if it was made out of straw? So we had said that according to Rabbi Yehuda, he's going to say that it's considered as if it was made out of metal. So the Gemara asks, what are we coming to teach? What is the Mishnah teaching us over here? The Amrinan Ro'in. It's trying to teach us that we apply this principle of Ro'in, that we consider it to be as if it were heavy, sturdy enough. Says the Gemara though, Hainu hach. Well, then it's the same clause. We're teaching the same thing. We've said that it has to be wide enough even though it's not sturdy. And now we're just giving examples. But the Mishnah doesn't waste words. So what's the novel teaching that we're trying to learn from the hay and from the reeds? Because it's not teaching us anything new. We've already said that it doesn't matter if it's sturdy or not. And then it's given us this specific example of hay and of reeds. But we already know that it doesn't have to be sturdy enough. So what's the chiddush? Mahu desema. What is it coming to teach us? What's the novel point? Bamina amrina. It's coming to teach us that maybe we might have thought that that when it comes to a crossbeam, that we're talking about a material that is used in a crossbeam, and that doesn't have to be sturdy. But shalom b'mina lo amina. But if it's something that we don't really make crossbeams out of anyway, then we don't say that it would be a valid thing. Kamash Malan comes the Mishnah to teach us that there's no difference, and whether it's something like wood, which we would normally use for something like a crossbeam, and whether it's something like hay, which we wouldn't use. But as long as it fits the physical dimensions, even if it doesn't meet the physical sturdiness, it's going to be approved by Rabbi Yehuda. Continues the Gemara quoting the Mishnah, Akuma, ro'in osaki iluhi peshuta. If it was shaped, if it was angled or bent or curved, so then we're going to view it as if it was straight. Asks the Gemara though, Pshita. The Gemara challenges this and says this is obvious. It's coming to teach us that we're going in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Zera. And the Rabbi Zera, if you've got a situation where the crossbeam is inside the alleyway, but the curved bit is outside of the alleyway, or the crossbeam is starting within 20 amos from the ground, but because of this curve, it's actually arching higher than 20 amas. Hi lamala ma'asara, or it's curved downwards, and the crossbeam is starting higher than 10 tefachim, but the bend is shaped like that, and it's coming, and the bend is coming within 10 tefachim from the ground. Then says the opinion of Rabbi Zera, then Rabbi Zera says that we're going to view it as if the bend is not there, and we're going to say, what are we going to say? I think we're saying that it's that we're going to view it as if it's we're going to view it as if we've removed this bend. I think I've read this slightly wrongly. That's all. So we're going to view it as if the curved section is not there, and ve'ein bein zeh lazeh shlosha, and where there is not 3 tefachim between as a gap, then ein tzarich lahavi kara acheres. And we're not going to need another crossbeam. V'im lav tzarich lahavi kara acheres. And if that's not the case, then we are going to need another crossbeam. Just one second. I don't think I'm reading this correctly. Well, we don't want to make any mistakes, do we? Great having picture books at the end of this thing. So the examples we've said are correct. We've got a situation where the crossbeam is starting higher than 10, but the bend is coming within 10 tefachim. Ro'in kol she'ilu yinotel akma misa. Then we view it as if we were to take away this bend, ve'ein bein zeh lazeh shalosha. Okay. So if we take away the bend, and now where you've got your valid parts of the beam, which are in the correct place and within the correct height of the crossbeam, so as long as there is less than 3 tefachim between those valid points, then you're not going to need another crossbeam. But if it is now wider than 3 tefachim, then you are going to need to bring in another crossbeam. So let's take, for example, all right, so we have our, let's say, our arched or our pointed crossbeam, okay? So where my wrists are, those are in a valid place. Where the point is, that is now higher than 20 amas. But let's say that just where my fingers are bending over here, where my knuckles are, or my finger joints are, let's say that area is where our point of concern is. So over here is where 20 amos is starting. So it's only really this tiny little point at the top of my fingers which is going above 20 amos. So as long as the gap between here, these knuckles here, to these knuckles here, as long as that is less than 3 tefachim, we won't need to add in any other crossbeam replacements. But if the gap between these knuckles here, or this space here effectively, yeah, let's say that space is more than 3 tefachim, so then we're going to need to add in a crossbeam as well to be able to complete and stay within the 20 hours. I'm glad we've understood that now. Okie dokie. Says the Gemara though, Hanami Pshita. I'm glad they found it obvious. The Gemara says that's also obvious. Hi basach mavoi va'akma misa chutz mavoi. The crossbeam is within the valid dimensions of the alleyway, but the bend is extending beyond this. So it's strichele, and that's why it was necessary for them to teach the halacha modesema, because what might we think? Leichush Dilma Asi Le'amshuche Basra, because we might say that we should be concerned that he's going to be drawn after it. And he is going to think, let's say, for example, we have our crossbeam like pointing outwards into the public space of the public domain. Okay, so because that's our crossbeam and the angle or the bend is shaped towards the public domain, he's going to think that he can actually carry in that area where the curvature or the bend or the angle is extending beyond the alleyway. So, Kamash Milan, Rabbi Zera is coming to teach us that this is not a concern. Continues the Gemara. Agula, what if you are using a round circular beam? Roin osa ke'ilu himirubah. So we're going to consider it as if it was square. Asks the Gemara, Hasu lalali. Why do I need this as well? I need it because of the following clause, the last part of our Mishnah, which taught us about pi. Kol sheyesh kefal gimel tefachim yesh bo rachav tefach. That anytime you have a circle, a cylinder with a circumference of 3 tefachim, then the diameter is going to be a handbreadth. Asks the Gemara, Mina hani mili. From where do I know this? Where is the biblical allusion to pi? Where is pi in the Torah? Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Amar Krah says in the Pasuk, Vayas es hayam, motzak ese ba'ama, misfaso ad sfaso. Says the verse in the Book of Kings, in Malachim Aleph. And he made a molten sea, 10 cubits from one brim to the other. Talking about the, if I'm not mistaken, the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Agul saviv v'chamesh ba'ama komasa v'kav shloshim ba'ama yisav oso saviv. So says the pasuk, he made a molten sea, 10 cubits from one brim to the other, and it was round, and its height was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits did circle around it. So since the how does maths work? Since the it was 10 amos from one brim to the other. Yeah, very good. So the diameter is 10 amos, and so the circumference around it is 30 amos. But asks the Gemara, V'ha'ika safasa. But there is a brim that we have to be taking into account. So surely this ratio is not actually correct. Amarav Papa, safaso, when it said talking about the brim, safas perach shoshan. The pasuk says that it was very, very, very thin. Kasivbei. It writes that it was very, very thin. Dichsiv va'aviv tefach usfaso, that the thickness, the thickness was, it says here it was just petals of, it's translated there as a lily. I thought it was a rose. So it was very, very thin. It was a handbreadth thick, and its brim was wrought as the brim of a cup. Kamase kos perach shoshan alpayim bas yachil. It was a handbreadth thick, and its brim was wrought as the brim of a cup, as the petals of a lily, and it contained 2,000 bat. And what we learn from here is that this brim was very thin, and so therefore it's not really taking it into account. But asks the Gemara, but nevertheless, there was a little bit at least. So the Gemara says, when we're calculating the circumference, it's calculating migavai kachashiv. It's calculating from inside of this brim. So the formula is still accurate. We're years ahead of understanding pi, and yeah, we should all be very proud of that. Tanya Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia taught in a baraisa. Yam she'asa Shlomo, the sea that Shlomo made, hayamachazik 150 mikvah tahara. It contained a volume of 150 mikvaos. Michdi. Let's see here. Mikvah kamehavi. The Gemara asks, how much is the volume of a mikvah? Arba'in sa'ah. It has a volume of 40 sa'ah. Kintitanya, as we learned in a baraisa, turning the page, says the pasuk, V'rachat es basaro b'mayim. You shall wash your flesh in water. You shall bathe your flesh in water, and the Gemara understands this to mean b'mei mikvah, in the waters of a mikvah. Continues the pasuk, kol b'saro, all of the flesh, which alludes to Mayim Shekol Gufa Ola Bahen. There has to be enough water that the whole body can go into at once. For Kamahain, and how much is this? Ama al Ama Barom Shlosh Amos. It would be a tank or a dimension of 1 Amma by 1 Amma with a height of 3 Ammas. And that would be enough for a body to be able to plunge into. The Shiar Chachamim May Mikvah Abayim Sa'ah. And so a mikvah with that kind of dimension would be able to hold 40 sa'ah of water. Asks the Gemara, Kama havu lehu. So how many mikvaos were in this molten sea? Chamesh me'a gamidi. 500 cubic amos. Litlas mea. It had 500 cubic cubits. 500 amot squared, because it had 10 amos in length, 10 amos in width, and 5 amos in height. And so it was able to hold that much water. So we had said that the minimum volume of a mikveh is 3 amot, right? 1 amma by 1 amma by 3 amot. Therefore, litlat mea, for 300 amot cubed would be mea, 100 mikvahot. Lemea v'chamishin, for 150 amot cubed, that would be chamishin. That would be the equivalent of 50 mikvahos. So, what we had just said before was that there were 500, what we said? Yeah, it held 150 mikvahs. So the Gemara is now going to say the following: Ba'arba mea v'chamishin sagya, that it would have been enough to have had the volume being 450 amot cubed. That would have been the equivalent of 150 mikvahs. Hani mili berivua. That is when it would have been a square shape. But Yam Shasa Shlomo Ogol Haya. But since the molten sea that Shlomo HaMelech made was round, so then it does have a different calculation. Michti. Now we continue to explore this a bit further. Kama Maruba Yasa ala Agol. Al Ha'egol, sorry. How much larger is a square when it's 10 by 10 amos than a circle with a diameter of 10 amos? Because don't forget, you're going to have the corners effectively that are being lost through to because of the shape of the circle. So how much are you missing out on? You're missing out on revia, a quarter of the total. La'arba mea, so if it was 400 amot cubed, then you're missing out on mea, on 100. La mea, if you are dealing with 100, then esrim v'chamisha, then you deduct 25. Hani mea ve'esrim v'chamisha havalahu. Well, if that's the case, then what we should be saying is that that 400 cubic cubits in our original calculation should be reduced to 300, which is the volume of 100 mikvahos, and then the remaining 100 cubits are to have 25 knocked off. And according to this, it was only, therefore, the Yam Shel Shlomo, the Solomon's Sea, was only the equivalent of 125 mikvahos. Tani Rabbi Bar Yechezkel. Rabbi Bar Yechezkel taught Yam She'asa Shlomo Shalosh Amos Tachtonos Merubahos. He taught that the sea that he made, the 3 lower cubits were square, v'shtayim elyonos agulos, and the upper 2 were round, which means that it's all starting to fit together that little bit better. Whether I've got any pictures here, I do not. That is most unfortunate. Okay. Nehi de Ipcha, I hope you're all getting this. This is quite complex and mathematical, so it's not my forte. Nehi de Ipcha lo matzi samarat. Although, granted, you cannot say the reverse, disfaso agol kasiv, because the verse had said that its brim was round. Ella emachada, but you could say that only 1 cubit on the top was round. So not like we were saying just before. Lo salkadaitach, we don't consider this possibility. Dichsiv, because the verse had said al payin bas yachil. That when we were talking about the thickness of the rim, we had said that it contains 2,000 bat. Yeah, bas kama havya. How much is 1 bat? So the Gemara answers shalosh se'in. It's the equivalent of 3 sa'ah dichsiv, as it says in the verse. Ma'aseh habas minakor. That the 10th part of a bat from a core. Dahavale shisa alfe girive, which tells us, what does it tell us? It tells us that the sea, which contained 2,000 bat, was therefore containing 6,000 sa'ah, which is the equivalent volume of 150 mikvahs. V'hakasiv, asks the Gemara, but it says in the pasuk, Mahsik batim shlosha salafim. But it said elsewhere that it held 3,000 bat. Hahula gudsha. So the Gemara answers that is referring to a dry volume. If it was a heaped measure, let's say it was containing powder. So if it was containing a heaped measure of dry volume, then it would be able to hold up to 3,000 of these bats. Who? Amar Abaye. Abaye says, Shema mina hai gudsha tlasahave. That comes to teach us, says Abaye, that when you have a heaped measurement of a dry measurement, then I think it's saying that it can hold an extra third. Saying that it can hold an extra third than if it was a liquid. It's nanami, and we learn also Sheidat Teva V'Migdal, if we're talking about different types of boxes and chests, or we're talking about Kiveres Hakash Kiveres Hakanin, or we're talking about a round straw barrel or a round barrel made of reeds, Ubor, or we're talking about a ditch, Sfina, Bor Sfina, Ubor Sfina Alexandris, or we're talking about the capacity of an Alexandrian boat, which were very, very big. So we don't necessarily need to go into the particulars of the topic of purity and impurity over here, but with regards to the measurements, we can say as follows, that even though the vessels have a capacity to hold 40 sa'ah if it was liquid, if it was holding a dry volume, then it would be able to hold 60 sa'ah, it would be able to hold korayim, 2 kor, if it was holding dry goods. So that is telling us that the heat measurement is a third larger capacity than if it was holding a liquid measurement. Okay, guys, let's move on to the next Mishnah. I encourage you all to go over everything that you've just seen to be able to understand it that much better. Says the Mishnah, L'chayin sha'amru, the side posts that we have talked about, Govan asara tefachim, then they should be 10 tefachim high, v'rachban v'ovyan kol shehu, and their width, their thickness can be any size, which is why I was referring to them before as a 2x4, because that's just a good sized post to be able to use. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says Rachban Gimel Tefachim. Rabbi Yossi says that the width of the beam has to be 3 tefachim, 3 handbreadths. Asks the Gemara regarding this point. L'chayin she'amru v'chulei, the l'chayin, the lechis, the side posts. Says the Gemara, Leimat nan stomach Rabbi Eliezer. Let's say that this is going in accordance, because don't forget we hadn't stated who the first position was saying, so we're trying to figure out whose opinion that first clause in the Mishnah is, that it can be any thickness, it has to be 10 tefachim high. So the Gemara says, Leimat tanan stomach Rabbi Eliezer. Let's say that this goes according to the position of Rabbi Eliezer, to Amar L'chayin Ba'inant, who says that we need to have 2 side posts. That's what we saw in the first Mishnah. Lo, the Gemara says, no, we don't have to say this. So, my L'chayin, why did the Mishnah over here use lechayin in the plural? Why didn't it just say, oh, by the way, regarding this lechi, how big does it have to be? So the Gemara asks lechayin dama. It's talking generally about side posts, not saying that you have to have two in to be able to make the alleyway valid. It's just talking about them. Ihachi, if that's the case, koranami nisni koros. Then why before in our last Mishnah did the Gemara not say koros in the plural? Why did it just say korah? Umay koros, and why would it need to say koros? Koros to alma, because we're just talking about cross beams in general. So why is it previously it just referred to one korah instead of two, and now it's talking about two lechis, but we're saying that actually it's not the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who said that you need to have two lechis. Hachi kalma, this is what it's trying to say. Osan lechayin shenechlaku bahen Rabbi Eliezer v'chachamim. The side posts that were argued about in the first Mishnah between Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim, how big do they need to be? Says the Gemara, Govhan Asar Tefachim, they have to be 10 Tefachim high. V'rochban v'ovian kol shehu, and their thickness, their width, can be any amount. V'kama kol shehu, how much is any amount? Tani Rabbi Chia taught, Afilu kachut hasarbal, even if it was as thin as the string used to tie a coat, if it was as thin as that, that is still going to be valid, according to the Mishnah. Tana, it was taught, Asal lechi lechetzi mavoi, ein lo ela chetzi mavoi. It was taught in a Tosefta that somebody who put a side post running along half of an alleyway, so then he is only going to be able to carry within half of the alleyway. Forgive me, let me try that one again. If he puts this lechi vertical, but he puts it halfway down the alleyway, so the Gemara is telling us that he's only going to be able to start carrying from that point halfway down the alleyway. Continues the Gemara. Pshita, this should be obvious. That's where he has started the entrance, as it were, to the alleyway, so that's where he should be able to carry from. Rather, we should say that he may carry in the inner half of the alleyway, even though there is no side post at the entrance to the alleyway. Hanami Pshita, that's also obvious. What might we think? We might think that he is going to come to use the entire alleyway. Kamash Malan, this comes to teach us that carrying in the inner half of this alleyway is going to be permitted. Amar Rava. Rava says, Asa lechi lemavoi v'hikbihu min akarka shlosha. What if he puts the side post in the alleyway and he raises it 3 hand breadths from the ground? So it's not flush against the floor, it's put up against the wall 3 tefachim off the ground. Or or he distanced it 3 tefachim from the wall. Says the Gemara, lo asa v'lo klum. Then it is going to be as if he has not accomplished anything. Even according to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who has this principle of lavud, that when something is less than 3 tefachim, that we consider it to be like it's closed. That only applies with something above, like the crossbeam. However, but below, with the side post, but when it comes to something through which animals can just freely walk through this space, so even though ordinarily we might extend a halachic principle, because the physical reality is going to be that an animal can pass through the gap, we are not going to apply lavud in that situation, and it's not going to count, therefore, as a valid lechi, as a valid signpost. Rabbi Yossi Omer Rachban Gimel Tefachim. So we had quoted Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah that the width has to be 3 tefachim. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yosef said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel, Ein halacha ka Rabbi Yossi. The halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi. And not only that, Lo behilmi v'lo b'lechayin. The halacha is not like him with regards to the subject of hilmi, of brine on Shabbos, and it's not like him with regards to these side posts over here. Okay. Amalei Rav Huna bar Chinana. Rav Huna bar Chinana said, "Behilmi amarla." With regards to the hilmi, with regards to the brine, so we've already learnt, we understand that the halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi, but l'chayin lo amarla. But with regards to the signpost, you haven't told us this before. So my shana behilmi. What's the difference in the case of hilmi, where we've said to pligi rabbanan alei that the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Yossi? L'chayin nami pligi rabbanan alei. So by signposts also, let's say that the sages are disagreeing with him, and we should say therefore the halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi in either case. Amalei shani l'chayin mishum dekai Rabbi Kavase. So they said, Rav Huna bar Chinana said to him that the l'chayin, the lechi, the signposts are different because Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi holds like the same as Rabbi Yossi. So they are arguing still on him. Rav Rechumi Masni Hachi. Rav Rechumi taught in the following way. Amar Rav Yehuda Berei de Rav Shmuel. Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel, Bar Shilas, Mishmei de Rav, taught in the name of Rav. Ein halacha Rabbi Yossi lo behilmi v'lo b'lechaim. The halacha is not in accordance with Rabbi Yossi with regards to brine, with Maseches Shabbos, with the halachas of Shabbos, and not with regards to the signposts over here. Amalei Amarta, they said, did you actually say this? Amalahu no. He said, no, I did not. Amarava, hi Elokim. Rava said, oh my gosh. Amarava gamirna lamine. He said that he did say this, and I learned it from him. My time akahadaba. What's the reason why he retracted on this? Mishum de Rabbi Yossi nimuku imo. Because there's a well-known principle that Rabbi Yossi's reasoning, his nimuko, is with him. And so the halacha follows his opinion even when there might be a majority view that is disagreeing with him. Amalei Rava bar Rav Chanan Abaye. Rava bar Rav Chanan said to Abaye, Hilchasa mai. What is the halacha with regards to the signposts? What is the halacha? Amalei puk chazi maya ma'at davar. Go and have a look at what people are doing. Since it is common to rely on a post with any width, that is the way, therefore, that we are going to practice. And before we start on, okay, we'll carry on a little bit. There are those who teach it with regards to the following discussion. Person who drinks water to be able to quench his thirst. He should make the bracha. We saw this in Maseches Brachos. That the person should say the bracha of Shakol Nihiyeh Bidvaro. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Rabbi Tarfon we saw over there in Maseches Brachos all those weeks ago, he says that the bracha that you make when you're about to drink water should be Borei Nefashos, Rabos V'Chesron, and Akol Ma Shebarasa. That he creates, that Hashem creates many forms of life and with their deficiencies. For all that you have created, Baruch Chai Olamim, that's the bracha that we're familiar with that we make after water, but Rabbi Tarfon says that's actually the bracha that you make before drinking water. Amalei Rav Chanan La'abaye, so the similar structure that we are seeing in our Gemara as well. Amalei Rav Chanan La'abaye, Rav Chanan said to Abaye, Hilchsamai, what's the halacha? Amalei Puk Chazi Mayama Davar. Go and have a look at what people are doing. The common practice is for people to say Shakal Nihiyeh Bidvara. That's the halacha over there. A similar structure to the conversation over here regarding a signpost. And so when we say what's the halacha over here, so we say go and have a look at what people are doing. And they are using signposts of any width and thickness. And that's all for today. So we will wish you all a meaningful and wonderful day. Thank you for joining us. And we will see you again next week where, please God, we will be back on live with a live class on Zoom. Wishing you all well. Have a wonderful week. Take care.